But now we're going to go straight into that debate that we kicked off with Storm. Should the UK take in refugees from Gaza? 0207 862 2222 is the number. Do give us a call. We're going to start with you, Larry, because obviously, even in recent years, we've had this tradition of taking in refugees from Ukraine, from Afghanistan. Those people that helped us in Afghanistan go back. And, you know, we do have a proud tradition all going back to the kinder transport. You know, that's who we are, isn't it?
Well, we have a housing crisis and many Afghanis are now being rendered homeless because there is no housing for them. And we've got Ukrainians and we have very little housing. So it's not been a very successful recent policy. I also think we have to ask the questions, do Gazans actually want to leave Gaza in the first place? I think a lot of them do not want to go anywhere. They feel it's their land and they're staying. So I think from Humza Yousaf, it's a fantastic virtue signalling exercise for him to tell the British government, you know, to open the borders. But I don't think that it's both practically we can't do it, and I don't think it's what many Gazans would actually want anyway.
I think, I mean, look, to say that it's virtue signalling, I think that's really unfair. I think it's kind of even inflammatory as should we take them in? And I'll tell you why that's inflammatory. And it's actually just causing division, because we do take in refugees from all over the world, and we made it so easy for Ukrainians. And what the Ukrainian war showed the whole of the world is that actually Britain can deal with refugees and asylum seekers. We can, and we can do it positively. But when it comes to people from Syria, Afghan, African countries, suddenly it's a question mark. Should we take them in? And I think it's a bit, I honestly feel there's some kind of racial discrimination in the question alone. Gazans, these people don't want to leave. They don't want to have to leave their land. And other refugees don't really want to leave their home. But suddenly it's a question mark. With Ukrainians, there was no question mark. There was no question. We must open our doors. We must let them all in. But suddenly, when it comes to the Middle East, it's a question mark. Why? These people are in severe trouble.
I think that many people's views have changed, having seen what happened with people from Afghanistan or people from Ukraine, that they've arrived, and then actually we haven't coped very well.
But that's a government's fault, because you were talking about housing, Lowry.
But housing is a really big issue.
But that's not their fault. The question there should be directed to the government. The reason why there's a housing crisis is because the Tory government haven't built enough housing. And therefore you can't say, well, we can't take any refugees in now. That's not fair.
But equally, we can't just throw the doors open every time there's a crisis, there's a catastrophe in some part of the world. We're going to have to set ourselves some rules about who qualifies and what level of need and how long we take people in. Ukraine, those Ukrainian refugees, so many of them just want to get back to Ukraine.
So do many refugees. And answering that, actually, we've got an international obligation. It's not a question of, well, we've got to set some rules. We've signed up to an international obligation that we will take our fair share. You know, the rest of the world takes their fair share. But Britain... Oh, my God, it's actually embarrassing across the world that we suddenly want to have rules and we want to close our borders and we can only take a certain percentage. Hard cheese. France takes theirs in. Germany takes theirs in. The whole world takes theirs in.
We are quite a small island.
No, we're a very rich country. We are a very rich country.
Hang on. I just think that if I was somebody who'd been born in the UK, who'd been sitting on that housing list and waiting and waiting and waiting, that actually I think sometimes they've waited long enough. And if people keep jumping ahead of them...
You know what you're doing, Larry? You're creating hate.
No, I'm not creating hate.
I think you are.
This is the reality. We've had calls from people...
Because you're saying people are sat there, our poor people...
No, there are.
But you know, therefore you're blaming refugees.
No, I'm not. But I'm saying
that they're taking the house.
Practical decisions as well as just emotional ones.
No, you don't.
And Humza Yousaf is making it emotional.
In one way, what Narinder's saying is the housing crisis has given us an excuse to turn people away. And we can always turn to that and look at our own needs. What maybe we're seeing from Humza Yousaf is it leadership and saying we don't have to follow, we don't have to wait for the rest of the community, the global community. We can actually say, we will accept these people because they are in terrible need.
And historically, of course, Scottish premiers have taken the view, let's have as much immigration as possible, knowing full well that people might land in the Isle of Bute, but actually where they really want to be is London or Manchester or Birmingham. They want to come where their communities are. So Scotland can say all they like, but people who come to Scotland don't always end up in Scotland, they go elsewhere. I think it absolutely is relevant if you've got people in the UK who can't be housed, for them to have a
so
right
irrelevant.
to say,
you're actually
I can't be
deflecting.
housed. No, I'm not talking about
Lowri,
the real...
Lowri,
you live in a house, I live in a house.
What
We've
you're
let me finish. We've had calls from people at home. I remember one in particular, a single mother who was in her mother's flat, but she wasn't homeless. She sat on that waiting list for years.
That's not the problem of the refugee.
When do I ever get to the... It isn't, but the reality is that we have to say, can we house these people?
Lowri, do you know we've taken 1 million legal migrants, and what you're blaming is the illegal
I'm not blaming
refugees and asylum seekers. That's who you're blaming. You are, and you're creating this thing that it's their fault. That's actually quite cruel.
I haven't said
I want to take some
fault.
calls on this to find out what people out there think. Joyce is in Aberdeen. Joyce, what do you think? Is Humza Yousaf right? Should we be accepting Gazan refugees right now?
No, I don't think so. The problem is nobody's saying, I heard everything that's being said about not enough room and they're bringing more in. The problem is even Egypt isn't opening the borders to the Palestinian people, who I have sympathy for, because they're ruled by Hamas. And when the terrorists come with them, Egypt will again lose all its tourists, which it did for about 10 years because of terrorists in their country.
There are other reasons why that border's shut, though, Joyce, partially because it can't be operated safely at the moment. I think that's a big part of why Egypt isn't prepared to open the Rafah crossing that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know, from your perspective in Scotland, you see Humza Yousaf talking as if there is space, there is room, as if there will be space made. How much do you think Scotland is in a different position from the rest of the UK to accept refugees?
I don't think they are. As for saying that Birmingham, they all want to go to Birmingham, that's because it's mostly Muslims there now. And in Scotland, I know the Glasgow Central Belt has got loads of Muslims there. So I don't think they have, because our own people don't have homes and places to live, bring up their children, school places, nursery places, everything. Doctors, I haven't seen a doctor for 3 years, you know.
So what Narinder's been saying is that we have domestic problems, we have a housing crisis, we have a problem getting GP appointments, all of those things. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Narinder, what she's saying is, why take a domestic problem and then blame someone overseas for that who is in a situation that most of us could never imagine?
Correct.
I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying it's just facts of life. If you're very rich and all your people are okay, you've got a place, everybody here should have the right to have a place to live safely and see a dentist even and doctor and things, just normal things.
But Joyce, don't you think that those questions are for the government to answer, and the failed leadership of Rishi Sunak and the previous PMs, that they've let this country down? It's not the refugees' fault that we've got a housing crisis. It's not their fault.
I know it's not, but where are they going to go? And if you put them in front of people who are born and bred here and put their parents have fought in wars and all that, you are going to start a problem. You're going to start racist attacks and everything that comes with too many people for not enough places.
I mean, Joyce...
Not what I want. I don't mind Palestinians. I like the Jewish people. It's just practicality. And I know the government's to blame for so much. Even in Scotland, believe me, they are a big problem.
I mean, Joyce, I remember visiting Montrose and interviewing a woman who'd fled Poland during the Second World War. So there is a real historical link with your part of the world accepting people in times of need, being part of a community and growing up with it as well. So you say born and bred, but we're already a very mixed society with...
I know I have mixed races in my family, but, you know, the Polish people and the Ukrainians, you've got to think about it, even if you don't want to, because you get accused of being racist. They are Christians, you know, the same sort of beliefs. I have Polish neighbours. I absolutely adore them. I think they're wonderful.
Joyce, I think that's a
Hard-working.
really dangerous line to go
I
down that
agree.
because they're Christian. Because Britain is a multicultural society.
I know.
We blend in, beautifully. And there's so many different religions. And we're tolerant of each other. Britain is tolerant of each, different races and religion.
Okay. I want to take one more call. Thank you so much for your call, Joyce. Amanda's in Lancashire. Should we be accepting Gazan refugees, Amanda?
Yes, we should. I actually think we should do more. Palestine, I believe, should be another state. Sorry, I can't hear, Narinder.
Okay, Amanda, even if these refugees come in and go to the top of the housing list in the way that Lowry's talking about, taking homes away from people that may have waited for them...
I've never used that. I won't use that phrase.
Okay.
I'm not taking anything. The reality is we have a shortage of housing, and how do we house people?
We're talking about somebody taking a home that somebody's waited on the list
I wouldn't use
for
the word
4 or
taking.
5
I think
years.
that's a very aggressive word. I would say they are offered a home according to need. If they come to this country and they're homeless, they have to go to the top.
Amanda,
it's important. Language is important.
would you be happy with that? Somebody going to the top of the housing list?
The one thing that the people say, what that has been said, a lot of these people do not actually want to leave their country. This could be a temporary thing. They might want to go back. We go back. You want to go back to 1997?
Thank you,
we
Amanda.
made
You made a very good point. We're going to have to leave that call. Thank you for your calls on this.